Oh, okay. I'm not gonna lie. I didn't change shirts, and yeah, I put these videos back to back. But if you go to Acts 17, verse 16, in Athens is where we start. Now, Paul had actually just got run out of town in Berea because the Thessaloniki Jews caught up with them, and they ran Paul to the coast, and then he took a ship down to Athens. And then while he's in Athens, then he's waiting for Silas and the other fellows to catch up with him. What he's faced with there is probably the deepest thinkers of the entire world at the day. Um, he's facing the Harvard professors, the Oxford professors, just the deepest, most prestigious thinkers of the day. And that was in Athens. And we're going to read some here together. While Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was greatly distressed to see that the city was full of idols. So there would have been statues all over the place. You can even see a bunch of ruins of those today. So he reasoned in the synagogue, so there must be more than 10 Jews, with the Jews and the God-fearing Greeks, as well as in the marketplace day by day with those who happened to be there. A group of Epicurean and Stoic philosophers began to dispute with him. Some of them asked, "What is this babbler trying to say?" Others remarked, "He seems to be advocating foreign gods." They said this because Paul was preaching the good news about Jesus and the resurrection. Now, Paul would have been in the marketplace where everybody was at. That's where you spread your ideas. There were big places, these big, huge coliseums and so on, where you could be invited to speak. There were also smaller ones called Odeons, and maybe he was in one of those. I know he would have been at one in Ephesus later on. But there are smaller places where the acoustics were wonderful, and you could talk to a lot of people at one time. And if you made a lot of sense, the neat thing about the Greeks during this time, well, they were Romans, but it was in the Greco-Roman Athens at the time. The one thing they were is they were logical. And if you made a good point, they would say, all right, let's hear some more. Oh, really? Okay. Oh, well, what about this? And then you gain a lot of respect from these guys if you were able to answer their questions. And if you were really, really respected, they would invite you in to talk to them in their little get-together of, super minds. And they must have been pretty impressed with Paul and said, hey, you know what, come talk to us. Well, Paul, I've said this a couple times already, Paul tried to be all things to all people. And so Paul's thinking to himself, man, I got to really make a good point here. And I'm looking around at all these statues and all these gods that they serve. And he comes across this hall of gods, and one of them, it says, to an unknown God. Meaning these guys wanted to cover all their bases. They're going to be like, we're going to make sure that we make Zeus happy and Apollo happy and Aphrodite happy and all these gods happy. And you know what? Just in case we forget a god, there's going to be a spot here. We're going to say, okay, we're going to cover ourselves and say, hey, here's a couple sacrifices to this unknown God. Because I'm sure there's one out there that we're forgetting. And Paul, he's like, you know what? I see you guys are really, really religious. Man, and he does the butter up thing. Hate to clue you in on a little secret with teachers, but the teachers can sometimes, when we give comments in the report card, we give nice buns, meaning, and I've talked about this with paragraphs before, we give you maybe a compliment, but if there's something you got to work on, we're going to put that in the middle, and then we'll end it with a compliment. So we sandwich it together, and maybe the blow isn't so hard to people, where maybe I don't just say, hey, little Junior, he's got to do way better in math. That kid, he's got to pick it up. Maybe I say, Junior, he really tries hard in math, and he could work on his fractions a little bit more, but you know what? I'm just really impressed with his effort. You see how I put that in there? Well, Paul, he's like, you know what? You guys are really religious. So he doesn't tick them off right away. And then he's saying, there's this unknown God. I think I might know who you're talking about. Let's pick it up at 22. Paul then stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus, which means there's a hill just outside of Athens where the Parthenon is. It's still there today. There's a little outcropping of a hill, and that's where the Areopagus met. They know that. It's still there today. You can see it on Google Earth if you want. And he says, "Men of Athens, I see that in every way you are very religious. For as I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, 'To an unknown God.' Now what you worship as something unknown, I am going to proclaim to you." So he finds this neat little angle. He said, you guys are really religious. There's an unknown God. I think I know who he is. The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth, and does not live in temples built by hands, and he is not served by human hands, as if he needed anything, because he himself gives all men life and breath and everything else. Wow. What he's saying there is, you guys have built wonderful, beautiful temples and everything. But that unknown God, that one you're wondering about, I know who he is. And he made everything. And he not only made everything, he's so powerful, he doesn't need your temples. He's so big, he ain't going to live inside of those. He does not need for some sculptor to make a picture of him. He's bigger than that. He's more unknowable than that. And your little temples, as beautiful as they might be, he's bigger than those. From one man he made every nation of men, that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he determined the times set for them and the exact places where they should live. God did this so that men would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. As some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring. He does another thing, another beautiful little angle. He uses poetry from one of their famous poems, from one of their famous poets, and quotes their poetry. So man, he's really working the room. Therefore, since we are God's offspring, we should not think that the divine being is like gold or silver or stone, an image made by man's design or skill. In the past, God overlooked such ignorance, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent, for he has set a day when he will judge the world with justice by the man he has appointed. He has given proof of this to all men by raising him from the dead. Now, when he says that last part, a bunch of those people are like, whatever. Because the Epicurean, there's two groups of people, the Epicureans and the Stoic philosophers. The Epicurean people were the kind that were like, hey, just live in the moment, whatever feels good to you, do. Which doesn't sound real new. I mean, the hippies said that in the 60s. Stoic philosophers, that was another group, and those guys were pretty black and white about stuff. And they were very self-sufficient. I will make my way, There's a lot of good qualities to those guys. They really worked hard and did things what they thought was the right way. And but the thing is, they tried to reason their way out of everything. And as soon as they hear something like raising someone from the dead, they're like, we're out. No way. When they had heard about the resurrection of the dead, some of them sneered, but others said, we want to hear you again on this subject. At that, Paul left the council. A few men became followers of Paul, which would have been quite a get for him, and believed. Among them and then they named some people. Dionysius, a member of the Areopagus, also a woman named Damaris, and a number of others. Now, why did they name them? That doesn't mean much to us. But at the time, they must have been quite the philosophers, quite the thinkers of the day. And when the New Testament was written, people would have known about them as famous people like Einstein. Whoever you think of as a real famous, smart person would have been someone that was named. All right, I took a little while on that one, but I'll upload this, and maybe you can fill out those questions.